Hello and welcome to the Last Mixtape podcast. My name is Stephen White, and on this week's show, we delve into how Chamge, MacGowan, Kirsty MacCall and the Pogues changed the sound of Christmas forever with the Fairytale of New York. But first, it was Christmas Eve, babe, in the drunk tank. An old man said to me, "Won't see another one." And then we sang a song, the rare old Mountain Dew. I turned my face away and dreamed about you. The words of Chamge MacGowan. Why, Stephen, I hear you ask, dear listener and dear viewer, although I think you may know why, are you quoting the opening words from the classic Christmas song, Fairytale of New York by Chamge MacGowan, Kirsty MacCall and the Pogues? Well, this week we'll be delving into how Fairytale of New York changed the sound of Christmas forever. Now, dear listener, as always at the start of the show, this is very much a vibes podcast. So this will not be a review of Fairytale in New York in some sort of conventional way. It is almost 30 years, or more than 30 years rather, since its release and coming on to 40 years after its release. So there is no need for me to review this song for you. Instead, we'll be delving into its lasting cultural impact of the song itself. And also, just before we begin as well, because this will be a topic and you will see this all over Christmas, and I have to be very honest with you, I'm very bored of it. But yes, the censorship argument around Fairytale of New York. I am sure it's happening on X or Twitter or whatever bullshit. I'm sure a lot of people are saying a lot of stuff. Frankly, it's boring. It's been going on for years and years and years. Nobody is censoring Fairytale New York. There are not copies of Fairytale New York being burnt in piles somewhere so that you may never listen to them. So I'm not going to indulge in any of that. If that's what you want, please go somewhere else. I'm not interested in that. Instead, this is something a little bit different. We're delving into the cultural impact of the song. So straight up, if you're looking to be angry and outraged or triggered and blah, 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 ain't happening here. I'm sure that discourse is happening somewhere else. We are delving into Fairytale in New York and its cultural impact. Now, released in 1987, or November 1987, and written by Chamge MacGowan and Jem Finer from the Pogues. Now, I think the story goes, or whether or not it is true or it is the lie or whatever, that it was actually through a bet with Elvis Costello, who was producing the Pogues prior to the actual song's recording, that he could write, Chamge MacGowan could write a Christmas song or a Christmas hit. And he bet he could, and many things happen along the way, but eventually he actually does write it and record it, although it would be Steve Lillywhite at the helm and not Elvis Costello, and a different version of the Pogues. The song would eventually end up on the album If I Should Fall From Grace With God. It does not hit number one. What beats it is the Pet Shop Boys with the cover of Elvis's Always On My Mind. That's a classic pub quiz or Christmas quiz question. But Fairytale in New York was not a UK number one Christmas song, as at the time was so important. I don't know if the importance of a Christmas number one is as big now, but at the time, dear kids, if you're watching, or maybe you're in it from America, maybe the Christmas number one is not as a big thing in America. I'm not sure. But it was at one point a very big thing, being Christmas number one. And Fairytale in New York was never that, although it is a classic song. So why then has it lasted so long and been so ingrained in popular culture? I'll just speak from my own kind of experience on it. Growing up Irish, but this song very much plays a part in my own history with Christmas. I was born in 1986. The song was released in 1987, so the perfect time for my entire life, our Christmases, to be dominated by it. But it is all pervasive, and for me, it is very much the sound of Christmas. Why then does it last? So my feeling has always been on Fairytale in New York, and it does one of the things that I love in music, which is an opening lyric. I love an opening line. I forever love the opening line of The Great Gatsby. In my younger, more vulnerable days, my father gave me a piece of advice that I've been turning in my head ever since. But an opening line with a twist of lime. It was Christmas Eve, babe, in the drunk tank, is a perfect perfect opening line, because not only does it set the time and set the scene, but it gives it that twist of line. It twists it, it contrasts it with everything you've probably heard before. Now, there obviously have been sad Christmas songs, you know, I'll be lonely this Christmas. Yes, I am thinking of the mud version of that, with the puppet on top of the pops. But yeah, it twists it, it contrasts it. It's such a beautiful line when you break it down. It was Christmas Eve, babe, which has this lovely, warm kind of feel to it if you don't know what's coming next. In the drunk tank, an old man said to me, won't see another one. I love that. I love how it contrasts it. I love how it subverts expectations, especially with the beautiful piano intro. Some say it was influenced by Ennio Morricone. It gives it that real world element to it. It feels itself sets the song up for what it is, which is a contrast in tone, a contrast in setting, and a contrast in characters. The setting of Christmas, what we would know as the Bing Crosby of it all, or the Slade, or the Paul McCartney, the kind of dancing around the Christmas tree kind of feel, or even the John Lennon War is Over. This is something a lot more different. This is something that was born out of the punk movement of the late 70s and into the new wave movement, and very obviously Shane MacGowan, a huge part of the punk movement. But the inclusion of that, the contrast of these characters who are down and out, is introduced to us in that opening line. Prince was also a great purveyor of this. Nothing compares to you. It's been several hours and 15 days since you last took your love away. This kind of twist and turn in a lyric that MacGowan was able to do throughout Fairytale of New York and throughout his career, was put characters who would not traditionally be seen as heroic, maybe, or even likable characters, or loving characters. And that's a key thing to the two characters of Shane MacGowan and Kirsty MacCall, who does the vocals on this, is that they're imperfect characters. They are not sitting around the Christmas tree around, chestnuts roasting on an open fire. These are two people who have a tumultuous relationship, who do not like each other but are connected, who have this imperfect relationship, this almost abusive relationship in some ways. It is hard. It is unwelcoming in what is at its center, but its setting is that of Christmas. What it also does is it puts these imperfect characters in a place of escapism. I have a feeling this year's for me and you. This time we'll get it right. This year everything will go my way. The horse I backed won. This time I will have everything squared away and what I want it to be. And I think that's such a powerful thing. That's such a powerful aspect of the writing and of the songwriting of this piece, is that those characters inhabit that world. And when the song opens up and it has the kind of the, I don't know what you would call it, kind of the jig or the reel of it, where the music begins to move and it begins to soar, and these two characters, they kind of look to the future with one another or without one another. It's such a powerful moment in the song. So all of this is set up by the relatability and the twist of line in the opening vocal. Kirsty MacCall plays such an integral part in the song, and it's very interesting that originally she came in as just a guide vocal recorded by Steve Lillywhite, and upon hearing it, the band themselves were just drawn to it. She's almost the perfect casting in it as well. Her father, Ewan MacCall, was a great folk songwriter and a kind of a stalwart of that kind of music. So it's interesting that she would eventually, join up with the Pogues on what is a Christmas classic, and in itself a folk song of sorts. Although a modern folk song, it is very much plays into that folk song feel to it. Even evoking the rare old mountain dew. And I think she plays such an integral part of it because the contrast and the relationship between her and Shane. Like, if it was just Shane who sang the song, if it was not a duet, it doesn't work. I believe maybe the original recording or the original writing was a sailor coming to New York, with kind of selling that idea of the diaspora, of which Shane was a part. And Kirsty plays this powerful character within it, who gives as good as she gets, and really just kind of plays that character so well. Her voice is so powerful. Her cover as well of New England by Billy Bragg was always something I've always loved, and without Kirsty, this song does not soar. It does not take flight. It needs that character who is just as powerful as Shane MacGowan, just as characteristic as him, just has that instant gravitas that she gives it. Without her performance, this song falls completely. And there's so many integral parts, because when you think about it as well, the playing on it, that the Pogues themselves, obviously, they said Jim Finer is a part of the songwriting process in them, but Pogues as a band really come to life in this song. Their playing is so perfect, the writing is so perfect, the melodies, everything that's going behind it raises it from its beautiful beginning as this kind of piano ballad into something more, into something aspirational. They capture the escapism, they capture the hope, the tragedy, the lost feeling of it all. Is all captured in this soaring music. I have to talk about this. This is one of my favorite things about this song, is the snare. I absolutely, towards the end, the drumming and the fills at the end as the song is waltzing off away. The sound of the snare just snapping and cracking on the beat, and just really doing those really kind of simple fills, but effective. Simple things done really effectively, and that's always something I tune into every Christmas, is the sound of that snare. I don't know if that's the same for you, but it is definitely that for me. Hopefully it is. I just love it because it cuts through everything that's happening in that song. And as I say, it became an instant classic, although not a number one. But growing up with this song, it was the beginning of Christmas. It was the first thing that for me, I know now that I think it's Wham is the one people get whammed when they hear the first kind of bit of Wham or Mariah Carey, which are also very, very good songs themselves. And in one case as well, in the Wham case, an imperfect story within that, kind of contrasting, as I say, the traditional kind of down home, almost Americana of Christmas, the slippers and the fire and all of this, and really bringing it out onto the street level, and that punkish nature, providing a Christmas song is such an amazing and beautiful thing. The iconography of the song as well is so important to how it connects with Christmas. There is a performance of it, if you will, on Top of the Pops that gets shown around sometimes. And that image of Kirsty MacCall and a fairly out of it Shane MacGowan waltzing in the fake snow has such a poignancy to it now. Obviously, that both passed away. Obviously, Kirsty MacCall passed away many years ago, quite sadly, and Shane only last year as well. And it's such a lasting moment, and it's so beautiful. And again, it's the idea that the central characters in this are imperfect. They are not heroes. They are not aspirational in a conventional sense, but they're real. And I think they sell that idea as well, that Christmas is not easy, that it can be a new start, but this time of year has a darker tint to it that they introduce and do not shy away from. And I think that resonates with people. As much as we love hearing Slade or Step Into Christmas by Elton John, which is one of my favourites, or Mariah Carey and stuff like that, I think Fairytale of New York taps into that part of us all where that kind of sadness to it, that kind of lament to it. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing because of it. And that iconography of the song and the video, obviously, is as well, is just simply beautiful and beautifully done, and through Shane's lyrics. And I hate to harp on about that opening line, but I am an absolute sucker for a great opening line, and boy does it have one with that. I mused on it as well in the lasting impression of it. When Shane died last year, weirdly, how I was told was Derek Kiley from Gilliband, who I do not know. I'm not a personal friend of his at all or anything like that, but I happened to be working in a place he was, and we were just in the kitchen, and he said, have you heard about Shane MacGowan? And he told me he passed away, and we had a very short conversation about it, where we kind of talked about how amazing it is, like that because it was near Christmas as well, that Fairytale in New York, this song that he wrote, and like there's this kind of flippancy about Christmas songs. There's this kind of, they're throwaway, they're gimmicky and all, but people don't have that about Fairytale in New York. It has a reverence about it, and that this one person, Shane MacGowan, and obviously the band Jem Finer and Kirsty and everyone who came together, but it is connected with Shane probably mostly, had such a lasting impression, wrote a piece of music, a piece of art that defined the sound, defined how all other pieces of art around this would be measured. All songs about Christmas, all songs that reference Christmas, all songs that are released new or even old, are held up to the standard of Fairytale in New York. The sound of it as well, when you listen to the song, it doesn't play into cliche. There's not a whole bunch of jingle bells going around, and it doesn't have that. The Phil Spector, you could also say, did something similar when he released a Christmas album as well. That kind of Motown beat almost has a Christmassy feel to it because of that, and you see that actually in I Want a Lot for Christmas by Mariah Carey. That has that feel to it as well, the big rolling wall of sound. But Fairytale New York defines the sound of it. When Ennio Morricone, and it's interesting that Ennio Morricone was brought into kind of the idea of the opening gambit of the song, the opening piano piece of the song. When Morricone died, there was this line, I believe, in an obituary where it said that he changed the sound of the Wild West forever. You know, once Morricone did his piece for the spaghetti westerns and the, A Few Dollars More and The Good, Bad and the Ugly, the Wild West never sounded the same again. And indeed it didn't. So many people now, if you're going to make a Wild West movie, will evoke the sound and the instrumentation and the chords and the melodies of Ennio Morricone. Thus is the same with the Pogues and Shane MacGowan. They have so many great songs, and MacGowan and the band have written so many great songs, Pair of Brown Eyes and Rainy Night in Soho, and they're such incredible music, but this is the masterpiece. To me, this is the best song. And it shouldn't be seen as a bad thing. It shouldn't be seen as, the Christmas song is the best song? Yes. I mean, it's so what they did with this record, what Kirsty MacCall and Jem Finer and the Pogues and Jim again did with this was completely subvert and change it all. Now, this is me. I'm 38 years of age. So as I say, this was released a year after I was born. So my world, my idea of Christmas has always been shaped by Fairytale in New York. And my mother was a very big Pogues fan and kind of in the era of punk herself and stuff like that. So this was right down the alleyway of my parents' taste in music as well growing up. So that kind of played into it as well. So the idea of the kind of hymns and as I say, the Bing Crosbys and the classic Christmas songs mean nothing to me. I don't know a Christmas hymn from an Easter hymn. I don't know that, I do know Christmas songs, but I don't know them in that way. To me, it is that. So all the others seem kind of quaint and almost false, where this sounds real and lived in. And that kind of lasting impression is so immense. It's so monumental. It's this huge, overarching thing artistically and musically that comes into play. Now, I'd be very interested if you're from another country, if you're from Germany or France or Italy. If you're American, I'd be very interested if you're not part of the Irish diaspora. Does Fairytale in New York come into it? Obviously, it is a song that nods to the diaspora of Irish people moving to New York, which has a historical reference as well. And we've spoken about that many times here on the podcast in reference to like Lankham and the Fontaines and stuff like that. There's bands that themselves would be interesting to see if they ever wrote a Christmas song. I don't think they ever would, but I don't think you should be passive about it either. It's interesting that none of the covers of this song can capture it. And we talked about Kirsty MacCall, and we talked about how she's an integral part of it and Shane is an integral part of it. It's interesting that some people for whom you can't cover their songs because you can't be them. I always felt that about Kate Bush. I've always felt it about Bob Dylan, is that, these voices that are so characteristic of the person. They're so intertwined, that it's almost impossible to do what they do. David Bowie's the same because of his phrasing. I'm thinking of the Little Drummer Boy, the David Bowie track. But yes, Christy Moore does a version of this. And I'm sorry, I know there's Christy Moore fans out there that probably love that version. I think it's terrible. I'll be very honest with you. It captures none of it. It doesn't get it. obviously there's a terrible Ronan Keaton versions, and somebody else did a version, and here's a version over here, and I think Bill Murray did a version of it, and all this. None of them capture it because none of them are Shane MacGowan and none of them are Kirsty MacCall. And none of them have that grit. None of them have the background. None of them have the credibility that those two people have performing that song, and the power that those two people have performing that song. And that is such a powerful thing in and of itself, that this is something that can't even be replicated using the source material, using the lyrics, using the music. You could have all of it. You could have the best players in the world perform this song, and it won't be the same, and it won't have the power. Some songs can live by covers. Some songs can survive by being interpreted a million ways from Sunday. You know, I did say Bob Dylan, but, you know, All Along the Watchtower is probably an example of that, or Johnny Cash with Hurt from the Nine Inch Nails. But there are some songs you just can't do. It's like movies. You know, you can't remake Lawrence of Arabia. Why would you do it? And I don't think in the same way you can't remake The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. In the same way you can't remake Fairytale of New York, although people ad nauseum try to do it. It is a monument that has outlived its central protagonists. It unfortunately, and I said at the beginning of the show, there's this thing about the controversy about the lyrics and all this, and as I say, you know, it's just this thing of clickbait every year. And look, if you want to go and listen to the original recording, you know, uncensored of this, you can. It's in the album version. Nobody is taking that away from anybody, regardless of whether or not it is bleeped on the radio. Songs being bleeped on the radio has been happening for years. I didn't know the actual lyrics to many Eminem songs in the 90s because I heard them on the radio. And when I did, I heard them on the album version. So it's not censorship because it is available, readily available if you want to hear it in its unedited and original piece. So it's not like, it is not akin to taking down a, you know, Guernica and saying, you know, or putting, you know, or putting away the statue of David or anything like that. It is not akin to these things. I know I said I wouldn't get into it, but I always think it's such a nonsense argument every year. But it's something that goes into it. But its lasting impression and its lasting legacy is that of, as I say, almost the Lawrence of Arabia, almost The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. It has become a classic that cannot be and should not be attempted to replicate. I really do think it should be left as it is and left in its perfect world, you know what I mean, in terms of the original recording. And as I say again, just for anyone, I do not mind people beeping it on the radio because why not? That's totally fair. Because art is a choice, whether or not you engage with it or not. You should be able to choose that, and listening to it on the radio is not a choice because it can be playing in the background, all these types of things. But the song itself is lasting monument to the greatness of Shane MacGowan. And I think as well, as I say earlier, it outlives the idea of this kind of like, you know, Christmas song as kind of a gimmick, although they are gimmicked now. That it is possible to find that, and it is possible to find truth in amongst all of that. The idea and the kind of the Ennio Morricone of it, the idea of changing this, how the Wild West sounded forever. Shane MacGowan does that. That beautiful, and I say seek it out. You'll see it over Christmas. That beautiful, although very cheap and probably poorly recorded, dance of Kirsty MacCall and Shane MacGowan on Top of the Pops in the Fake Snow is so poignant and so perfect and plays into it. And I think there's something about us. There's something, maybe it's an Irish thing. I wonder if it is, that we, more than anyone, are drawn to this, and that it could only come from the Irish diaspora. It could only come from an Irish band, that kind of tragedy, that hope, that imperfect nature of it, wrapped around. I was talking about recently that there's this beautiful video of Tommy Tiernan talking to an American comedian of some sort about what it means to be Irish, and And the idea that music and poetry and writing were free, and that's why we're so good at it, because everything else was taken from us. I think there's something of that in A Fairytale in New York. There's something of the freedom. There's something of the tragedy. There's something of the sadness. There's something of the hope. There's something of the happiness. There's something of, you can't take that away from us. And the future is something you can't take away in the realms of this song as well. And the two characters, whatever happens to them afterwards, whatever their relationship is, it goes on. And doesn't end on a perfect note. It doesn't tie itself up in a bow. We're not left happily ever after. We're not left with, whatever, a kind of a resolution. The song resolves itself in a very different way. It goes from its opening to its closing, and it waltzes off, as Kirsty MacCall and Chamge MacGowan do, into the snow on that fateful recording of the Top of the Pops. But that's it. The Fairytale in New York. How it changed the sound of Christmas forever. Did it? I don't know. Look, you may disagree. There may be another song that you feel that has been released since or before changed it forever. You also may have your own opinions on the Fairytale in New York. You might even like the song. I don't know. But do let me know in the comments below. But that's it for this week's episode. A special on the Fairytale in New York and how it changed the sound of Christmas forever. And so it goes, and there it went. But before I go, thank you for listening and watching the Last Mixtape podcast here on YouTube, Apple, and on Spotify. You can support The Last Mixtape by subscribing and liking and sharing and doing all the commenty bits to help the podcast grow. I would be forever grateful. You can also send on your music to Stephen@thelastmixtape.com, because next week the Count of Monty playlist will return with these end of year song playlist. So do send in your tracks or your submissions or who you think should be on it, and I will send them on to the Count of Monty playlist and see what he has in store for you next week. But for now, that was The Last Mixtape podcast. You're the listener and the viewer. I was Stephen White. Hey, so long.